Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I'm your host and researcher for the week, Dennis Cheney, and this week we have Hitler in South America, the documented truth of Hitler's escape from Berlin. I'm joined, as always, by Patrick Ryan. How are you doing this week, Patrick?
I'm good. I get no title at all. Nothing.
Oh, don't try to
I
redo
like how
my
you're just
argument.
researcher and host though. You're chained to that host title. You got to be the host. You got to have that in
Well,
front of your name, huh? I
you
see.
left me out last week, so this is my revenge that I
Guy that I was
promised.
explaining things to. I at least described what you were gonna do. I'm just a person here.
You're just here. He's obviously our co-host, and this is for some reason your first listen into the show. We
I
are
hope it is, and I hope they think we argue like this just all the time throughout the show.
platonic life partners in the making. Somebody please marry him and take him away from me. Please take this brief time to like, share, rate, leave a comment before we get going. We got a very history episode this week, Patrick.
I've heard of this Hitler guy before.
Yeah, I don't know if how many listeners are familiar with this man named Adolf Hitler, but when you start getting really down into the nitty gritty, it turned out he was kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
Like
not a great person either. I just want to say that up front. Not a great person.
I mean, that's a matter of opinion. Well, yeah, obviously
Wow.
he's not a great person.
I love how
maybe
you started to step into it. You're like, no, that's too far. I can't do that.
maybe one of the worst people. Obviously, we shouldn't even have to say, but
No. But if you weren't aware who he was, now you are.
I went all around the roundaround this week. I'm not going to promise a two-parter, but I started getting interested in where did Hitler go after World War II? And I started with a book called Hitler in Antarctica,
Mm-hmm.
the documented truth of Hitler's escape from Berlin. And I moved on to some CIA and FBI documents, and really just so much history stuff that I didn't even link to most of it. It's just if you just go on and you just Google Battle of the Bulge, Battle of Berlin, you'll find plenty to read about this history. But as we get into the more conspiratorial stuff, I'll of course give our sources. But I wanted to know, is he in Antarctica hanging out with reptoid aliens like you think he is?
Well, I mean, okay, so I had a really hard time not getting sidetracked by this topic when I did the esoteric Hitlerism, Nazi UFOs, and Antarctica episode. Like, I tried not to delve off because I did come across a lot of stuff about what happened to him. And then there's the connection in South America and stuff where we know a lot of them did go, which made sense. But it also seems like there was a base in Antarctica. And if you had a base in Antarctica that you could drive a submarine, way down underwater to get into this other place, why wouldn't you go hide there?
Why wouldn't you? And
The weather's better in South America. I could argue that.
Yeah, I mean, if I had my choice, I'd probably do South America. I mean, it depends on what's going on in the center of the earth.
That's true. Yeah.
Which we don't necessarily get into. This is more of a primer for if we want to get into the future with where is this guy? This is some evidence that he might not be dead, or well, he's probably dead by now. But
mathematically, yeah, probably.
Yeah, but yeah, are you ready to get into it?
Yeah, but if they want to get into the inner earth stuff and you didn't find those episodes, scroll back. There's some inner earth stuff back there.
Oh yeah, look for our Hollow Earth episodes for
Yeah.
sure. I really want eventually to do an episode where it's just flat out Hitler on the moon base with the Intergalactic Federation. Eventually, we got to do that, but I've yet to find something that.
I was gonna say you might have a hard time finding source material for that.
I'll just make it up.
Okay, that's perfect.
Yeah, that's great. I'll just ruin the show.
This week on Cryptic Accounts, Dennis Dreams.
So, my dream. So the official story. In 1943, Germany was fighting an offensive battle on two fronts against America and Britain to the west and the USSR to the east. But in February 1943 was when the beginning of the end started. Hope of the two-front war evaporated when the German Sixth Army fought deep into the Soviet Union, but was annihilated at the Battle of Stalingrad. Have you ever seen the movie Stalingrad? It's amazing.
I'm not sure.
Actually, it might be called Enemy at the Gates, but there's also a movie
I
called
have seen
Stalin. But
that.
yeah, that's an amazing movie.
That is an amazing movie.
Okay, by June of 1944, the Western Allies had landed in Normandy and gained a foothold to begin their march to Berlin, and they began systematically pushing the Germans back to their capital. They would reach the German border by September of 1944, but they wouldn't cross the Rhine until March of 1945. The Germans were giving up quite the fight, basically. That's when the Battle of the Bulge happened,
Yeah.
etc. I never realized it took us that long.
Yeah, it was not a quickie at all.
Yeah, it almost took us a full year since we landed to get over there. Um, Meanwhile, in early 1945, Joseph Stalin, the Soviet premier, announced a race between two Soviet marshals, George Zhukov and Ivan Konev, to take Berlin. And this is like true, like crazy Soviet. Like he literally just said there was no plan. He's just like, you go. First one to get their wins, basically. And they took it like extremely competitively.
I
And they
mean, yeah, based on what I know about the USSR at that time, that's an order from Stalin you take pretty seriously. You don't know what the prize is. It's probably just not dying.
right.
The loser probably dies.
Yeah, I would assume that if it didn't go as planned, one of these men would have died.
Probably.
So, also in January of 1945, Hitler withdrew to his now famous bunker. And I found this interesting. His bunker was like way more lavish than I ever heard it was. First of all, it was 18 rooms,
I
which is
mean, you're
probably,
gonna you're gonna need some space.
yeah. I mean, have you ever lived somewhere with 18 rooms though? That's like a big,
I've stayed at a couple hotels. Does
yeah,
that count?
that counts. Uh,
An extended stay?
that kind of counts if you rent out 18
Well,
rooms.
I didn't rent out all 18 rooms, but I did harass 17 other rooms people, so I think that kind of counts the same.
You're
I was
basically,
in all those rooms, is what I'm saying.
you are our generation's Hitler.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
also his Hitler was entirely self-contained. So it had its own oxygen, its own water. He could just you could live down there indefinitely as long
Yeah.
as you had food stock. Um, and it was about 50 to 60 feet below the Reich chancellery.
I mean, this is not surprising. They were like building UFOs and stuff. Like,
Yeah, I wish this was exciting as a UFO Hitler thing, but if you just love learning about the Fuhrer. So by April of 1945, both of the Soviet marshals had reached Berlin and they began flanking the city. And this resulted in what would come to be known as the Battle of Berlin. And at this point, the Soviets had close to 1 million soldiers camped out on the city ready to go.
jeez.
Yeah. And as a result of this was so intimidating that actually on April 12th, 1945, which I think was the same day that Roosevelt died, General Eisenhower, who was the supreme Allied commander, halted all of his armies on the Elbe River against the wishes of Churchill and many other Allied leaders. He'd basically seen what the Soviets were up to. He decided it was like way too risky, way too costly to try to enter this territory. And also in 1944, this Berlin had kind of been designated within like a Soviet zone. They were going to chop up the country into like 4 different parts. It ended up just being 2. But the Russians had 1 million people there in their Soviet zone. He knew some bad stuff was going to get down, and Eisenhower ended up being criticized for this. It would dog him for much of his later career, and even to this day, people still write stuff that Eisenhower should have went in, and it might have saved lives, or it might have stopped the Cold War.
I
Or
mean, I'm
something.
not
I don't know what.
a military strategist expert, but I mean, if I saw 1 million Russians just camped out, and they're kind of like, you could tell they're being competitive with each other because they're like pushing each other and elbowing as they try and go into Berlin. Like, you just don't,
Yeah.
you don't mess with that. Like, they're fighting each other to fight the Germans. Like, just let's let this play out. Then we'll take care of them later.
And that's ultimately what Eisenhower decided. And this is part of the reason why we may never know what actually happened to Hitler, because we just let them have their way with the city. We just completely let them have their way.
Well, Russians are generally pretty honest with stuff like this, so I'm assuming we've got the accurate information.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we do. So on April 20th, 1945, which is Hitler's 56th birthday, the Russians began shelling the city of Berlin until it surrendered.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. And this would go on for a while. And this is how many they used. The USSR dropped more artillery on the city around this time than the entire tonnage of artillery dropped by the Western Allies in the preceding years on the city. So every plane flight we ever went over, they just was coming out of cannons, hitting Berlin. They were decimating it. It was not. It was. I mean, it's not good for Berlin, I guess.
Well, yeah. There's going to be a
So,
little like remodeling needing to happen after that, I'm sure.
mhm.
Yeah, just that's crazy. More than we did the entire time leading up to that point.
Yep. And this
Wow.
was only about 2 weeks that this ended up lasting.
Crazy.
So yeah, and a million people were going in. So
Yeah.
Hitler, who had already kind of lost his mind, we could argue years ago, months ago, decades ago.
I would argue he may not have ever actually had it.
Well, we have a lot of Hitler jokes this episode.
I mean, I would argue once the dog painting started happening, that may have been where he was actually losing it at.
Like before anything.
Yeah, before anything ever happened, that was where the mind started to go. He started painting all those crazy dogs, and then next thing you know, he just hates all the Jews.
He drew that picture of the dogs playing poker.
Yeah.
That's when we know Hitler lost it. So he had lost his mind, but he was still in his like giant bunker. I always pictured Hitler like in the bunker at the very end, and it's like 1 or 2 rooms, and he's like in there with his wife, and he's not got a lot going on, but he was still like really in control.
I kind of feel like that was some level of indoctrination we got in school that made it seem like that. Because I kind of remember like when I learned about this in middle school or whatever, it was kind of painted as like he was cowering in some bunker and there's, like crates around him and stuff like this. Like this was a storage room that Hitler decided to take his last stand in.
Right. Not like a pre-planned giant bunker. Yeah. Now, he was definitely by definition cowering. Although where else would you go but your giant 18-room basement?
He did seem like he was a little bit paranoid. So it actually makes sense that he'd set up like a self-contained bunker.
Yeah, it does make sense. And he was still
it's almost like he knew this might not work out very well for
him. Yeah, it is. And we'll get into some of that. So at this time, he was still actually meeting with Goering, Himmler, Goebbels at this time. But by April 23rd, the city was basically being protected by Hitler Youth members and what was called the Volkssturm, which means the People's Storm. And that was a militia that had been around since, I believe, the 1920s, or shortly after the World War I, at least. But at this time was basically untrained people and like old men who had fought like 30 years ago. Like
just very old racist men is what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing right now.
The true believers. They wanted their shot to fight. And it's really sad, actually. Like they did, like Hitler like tried really hard to get them like uniforms. And that their uniform ended up like the people who even had uniforms, it was like an Air Force hat with like army pants and like like a different shirt. It was like they all had a uniform, but it was like a mismatch of like other uniforms.
And well, it was that or the towels weren't going to match in the bunker. And who wants to live in a bunker without matching towels?
Yeah, pretty much.
Not this Fuhrer. Not this Fuhrer.
And he was basically hell sound like everyone's going to die. Like if I'm going out, like every German's going to die. You're going to fight till the end. And he also started destroying the city's food supplies.
All right. Now this is seeming a little counterproductive, but okay.
Right. He destroyed half of the city's bridges, which is like over 120 some bridges.
The traffic after that too.
No, it wasn't good. And he destroyed a quarter of the subways by flooding them. And this all happened on his orders. And also he was still trying to get like reinforcements from like outside the country. Like he wanted like 10,000 Luftwaffe and like all this crazy stuff he was like telling people to get. And it was basically impossible to get everyone there.
Well, he took out half the bridges and the subways. Yeah. Like travel is terrible at this time.
Exactly. There's like no way to, and interesting enough, Hitler would have destroyed more, and I don't even know why he would have to. I guess if you're Soviet, you wouldn't be bombing bridges because you need the bridges to like.
Yeah.
But he had actually tried to plant bombs on like the rest of the bridges, almost all the railway stations, and blow up all the power stations.
Yeah, it's like a weird self-destruct. Like,
yes,
it's almost like he was kind of selfish or something.
Yeah, it's almost like I read a book. I forget what it was called in high school, actually. That it might have been called like The Psychology of Hitler, and it argued that he had some sort of build up and destroy syndrome, and that maybe he always knew that he'd build this big thing, and then he just wanted to watch it all like crumble.
Interesting. Based on what that make like if you told me that without talking about all this first about him destroying the bridges and the food supply, that wouldn't have made as much sense. But now that you've said all that, yeah, that kind of that makes sense.
Right, and then but the reason why most of these didn't work, I found interesting, was because workers actually
They were like, we
largely
live here.
they sabotaged it. Yeah, they were like, don't plant a bomb there. Like the SS would go put a bomb on a factory, and the workers would just be like, once they leave,
Let's get this bomb out of here. There was a lot of bombs just blowing up in empty fields, and everybody was very confused on the SS. Like, I know we put it on the right building. Why is that field blowing up?
Yeah, they're like, we've got enough bombs in our life at this point.
No kidding. Like the whole city's getting shelled and stuff. Yeah, it's not good.
It's bad. So on April 28th or 29th, we don't quite know, General Heinrich disobeyed Hitler's direct command to, quote, hold Berlin to any cost and never retreat. And this is basically when it's over.
Yeah.
And this was probably on April 28th because that's the day that Hitler finally married his longtime mistress, Eva Braun. And on April 30th, 1945, the couple committed suicide. The official story is that Braun took a cyanide capsule, Hitler took a cyanide capsule and poisoned the dogs, and then shot himself. And that's the story. But how do we know that is the question.
Yeah. I mean, that's always been the question. Yeah.
So the official story goes that their bodies were then hastily cremated in the Chancellery Garden as the Soviets closed in on the building. The story goes that Hitler's body was discovered in the bunker by his valet, Heinz Linge, and that Linge and two other men, including the Nazi youth leader at the time, wrapped Hitler's body in a rug, drug it to the garden, and burned it in gasoline.
They like did a mob style body cleanup, basically.
Basically, I think it's probably all they had. Which is, yeah, I'm not gonna go there. So numerous witnesses, however, state that the top of his head and feet were not fully covered, and therefore he was still recognizable after the burning. However, keep in mind, these are people who would have been captured by the Soviets, and this is where that information would be coming
from.
Also, why wouldn't you burn? Why? I mean,
why would you leave the head out? That's the most recognizable part if you're gonna,
Right.
It just feels like they were probably better at destroying things than that. Like,
right. You think you'd wrap his head, like maybe his feet could be hanging out, but why his head?
Why would you leave the head out? I don't know. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
So the Soviets actually weren't informed of this until May 1st, which is actually the next day, during peace negotiations with the remaining Nazi leadership. As part of their investigation, they apparently found the corpse, including teeth that they claimed were later identified by Hitler's dentist.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll get into it. So after allegedly obtaining the ashes, the Soviets continued to move them around for fear that they would create a final resting place that could become some sort of shrine or memorial to Hitler. And on May 8th, 1945, the Germans finally surrendered. So that's the official story. However, there is no actual evidence, with the exception of this dental testimony, that any remains were actually found at all by the Soviets of either Hitler or Eva Braun.
That you don't ever find Ava is a little bit more confusing as well.
I believe they found some remains of her and Goebbels in a separate excavation. They actually claim to have found the teeth by like sifting through sand. They claim they were like sifting things out and they like found these teeth.
I hadn't heard that before. That's weird.
Sifting through dirt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So controversy immediately began in July of 1945 when Joseph Stalin was asked how Hitler had died. And he famously stated, quote, either in Spain or Argentina.
Okay. That's Stalin saying that.
That's Joseph Stalin, the guy who should have known. And this is July. So
he's who had the million men on the ground. Like they were who found these remains, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the Soviets.
They would have been who was interviewing these witnesses or high ranking. Just that doesn't. Okay. So he didn't. So Stalin's basically saying he did not die in Germany that day.
Yeah, and he in fact said it directly at the famous Potsdam conference that he had with President Truman. Truman directly asked Stalin in front of people whether Hitler was really dead, to which Stalin replied, no.
Then why is that not the story that we hear all the time?
Okay.
Like, I don't feel like that gets brought up enough. I don't think I
No.
was aware of this Stalin quote at all.
No, there's like more than one Stalin quote. Stalin was actually probably the biggest early proponent of whether or not Hitler was dead.
Interesting.
They would publish the evidence that he was dead, and then Stalin would come out, or someone else would come out and say, yeah, he's not really dead.
Huh.
There was some sort of disinformation thing going on that we
Yeah,
really haven't
what's
got to the
going in
heart
my
of.
head is like, what advantage is this to Stalin to make the world think if Hitler is in fact dead, to make them think that he is still alive? How does that benefit the USSR, Stalin personally, anything?
Well, we'll get into that a little bit.
Okay.
And we can speculate as well. So
Okay.
in 1952, almost just as interestingly, Eisenhower stated that, quote, we have been unable to unearth one bit of tangible evidence of Hitler's death.
Now, again, I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Yeah. Subsequently, there'd be numerous follow-up studies, allegedly by the Soviets, of the bunker, but much of this has been lost or shrouded in secrecy until some of it was released in the 1990s after the fall of the USSR, and some of it was just straight up lost till the 2000s. There's probably other stuff that's just like straight up lost.
Hidden in a bunker somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And from what I could tell, there's really nothing conclusive. And this is just based off independent research. At that time, we did not have the technology to say this is Hitler. It just did not exist. We couldn't go get his nephew or uncle or whatever and like compare DNA. We could tell that it was type A blood.
Okay, that narrows it down not very much at all.
Could also tell if blood was male or female. So, for instance, they did a big study of the bunker, and they found a piece of skull that they thought was Hitler's for like years and years and years. And then when it was later retested, they found out it was a woman's. So they're like, well, it might be Ava Braun, maybe.
All right, well, now you're just grasping things.
Right. It could have been anyone's shot there. Maybe it was Ava Braun, but that doesn't mean it was Hitler's, because that's apparently the only piece of Hitler. And they also found a stain on a couch inside the bunker somewhere that had type A blood on it, which is Hitler's blood type. Now, keep in mind, a lot of other Nazi leaders killed themselves. I didn't go into like what were all of their blood types, but none of
that would have made for an interesting episode.
Himmler, B. Goebbels, B plus. A lot of this was restudied later. They found out that the piece of the skull, and I remember hearing about the piece of the skull when I was a kid, and then I remember hearing in college that it was retested and that it was a woman, so it was definitely not Hitler. So there's nothing that we could tell that's actually conclusive. They just simply didn't have the technology. They only know if something's male, female, and what the blood type was. And also, Patrick, I went ahead and dove into your question because I had the same question. What were some of the reasons why Stalin might have kept rumors alive or created rumors? On one hand, he wants Hitler to be dead because he's the guy who killed Hitler or found Hitler's body and they took Berlin. On two, here's some other obvious reasons why he might not want Hitler to be dead. For one, Stalin had ambitions for the Soviet Union to keep expanding, obviously, perhaps over the entire world. So, like we call Hitler or Nazis today, he had an interest in there being like this Hitler out there somewhere. Basically. And keep in mind where he said Hitler was, Spain at this time was a fascist country. And so it would behoove him to say that Spain was hiding Hitler, and Argentina was also fascist sympathizing and came under came under the rule of Juan Perón in 1946, who many characterize as fascist, but it's kind of debatable whether or not he was actually a fascist. But at this time, he basically pointed to two places, one in Europe where he obviously wanted to take over, and one in the Americas where he wanted to have a foothold, Cuba, etc. And he said, oh yeah, Hitler's definitely one of those two places. And so that's the best I could tell why he would lie about something like that.
Yeah, and when you put it that way, it does make a lot of sense. Like that he would say those two places as now he can move forward militarily. Like, because he
Move
has
forward, yeah, and discredit people.
Yeah, and discredit people and be able to invade these places and have an argument with the rest of the world on like, look, I'm trying to find Hitler, you guys. Why don't you guys want to find Hitler?
Now, oddly enough, the best I could tell, because that was my next question, was like, did Stalin go hunting for Hitler? I can't find any evidence of that. He would just allude to the fact that he was somewhere else. So it's very strange. And part of me wonders, like, is Stalin like the root of all these rumors? I don't know. Or is that the truth and Stalin was just being like playful about it? Because the people who say he actually went somewhere, he would obviously go somewhere friendly to him.
Yeah.
So let's skip to the more classic theories. So in 1948, the magazine Diario Ilustrada, which is located in Santiago, Chile, published an interesting article. The author of the article was friends with a gunner in a Ju-52, which is a German transport aircraft. And this gunner, obviously one of the many SS people who escaped to South America, was working with the SS to defend Berlin at the final days of the war. Now, according to this article, the young man was working on a refueling operation on April 30th, 1945, in Berlin, when suddenly he was elbowed in the ribs by his radio operator. And the two, in shock, looked up, and about 100 meters away stood a sleek Aradio AR-234, which was the world's first jet-powered bomber. Getting ready to enter the plane, standing right outside of it, was, quote, without a doubt, Adolf Hitler, dressed in field gray uniform and gesticulating animatedly with party functionaries who were seeing him off.
And this is the day that he supposedly killed himself.
Yeah, it was a few hours before he killed himself.
So, okay.
The two men were, quote, extremely astonished to learn just 7 hours later that night that Hitler had allegedly committed suicide. And here is a picture, actually, I've included of what was called the Unity Rally in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1938, because it's easy to forget like how big of a presence the Nazis actually had in the South Americas. This was an over 20,000 person strong rally of Argentinians, and also oddly, like some Americans traveled down to participate. What was celebrating when Germany annexed Austria.
Well, yeah, we had a whole Hitler's Youth. Like there were Nazi sympathizers in America very early on, like before the Nazi Party became what it really was.
Right.
Like there was Hitler's Youth. There was all those things going on in America too. So that makes sense that like there were Americans that went down there for that. It's like a big festival.
Yeah, it was a big Nazi festival.
Yep.
So also in 1938, a German interest built what is now known as the Magnificent Hotel, the Yao Yao. I guess that's the LLs, the Yao Yao, the LLAO,
yeah,
which is about 700 miles southwest of Buenos Aires. And this is like still almost to this day in the literal nowhere of Argentina. And it is a massive estate. I included a picture here down below we'll get to, but it is this massive hotel in the middle of just nowhere, which makes you think somebody was planning something long before stuff started going bad.
Yeah.
Now it makes it stranger than the faraway location. People likened it to like the American West during the cowboy days. It's just not the place you build a 5-star hotel. Was at this time in this province in Australia toward the end of World War II. Nobody is basically living here. There's just this hotel. One of the only few businesses there was at least one confirmed plastic surgery clinic.
Near this hotel?
Yes. Which opened up about a year before World War II ended.
They're just not doing anything because nobody lives out here.
It's just a giant German financed hotel with a plastic surgery clinic nearby in the middle of the wilderness.
Huh. Nothing suspicious going on here at all. Nothing.
Oh, no. Nothing.
Let me
at
know
all.
when we get to some stuff that seems like it might be a red flag.
Okay. I'll give you an alert.
Okay.
Another famous luxury hotel was built just across the way in Chile. And I have here a picture of the hotel, Yao Yao. Um, and at this point, I have to tell you where I branched out of this book and like other stuff. I found a group called Shark Hunters.
Okay.
Um, so I was like, why does everything in this book talk about the shark hunters? So I went in search of like who these people are, like looked them up online, went on their website and all this stuff. The shark hunters are self-described serious U-boat historians. Um, I mean, to the point where their members include like actual people who operated U-boats.
Okay.
So Nazi party members, soldier people.
But
And
we're
these
just
are
into
the
the
best thing.
boating aspect of it. Like it's not we're not, look, we let the Nazi stuff go. But those boats were awesome, man. And we can't get over the boats. Like we got to keep the boats going. That's
I need to look more. Yeah, I need to look more into
okay.
who the shark guys are. But I think they're legit. I think they actually are like legit hardcore historians who are like, we don't care who you are. Like, we want to know about U-boats and more importantly, submarines. They're also into like submarines in general, but mostly U-boats.
Okay. I'll give them the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt here. I will. I'll give them the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt.
So this group, as part of their research, has taken many trips down to these kind of mysterious German hotels down in South America. And in one such visit that was recounted in this book was from 2008. And at this point, we basically know from your research and from other stuff that there's no doubt that many members of the SS escaped down here.
Yeah.
Basically, nobody's in doubt of that. Like, German people went to South America. The question is, did Hitler? So on one of these visits around 2008, the shark hunters asked, this actually might have been their first trip down to the hotel. They asked somebody who was working at the hotel who had originally lived in the hotel. And the staff member made a little mustache with his finger, put his right arm up, and started goose stepping around the lobby of this hotel.
The hotel in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
There's staff there.
Yes.
Like it's fully.
There's people work there.
This is so weird. This is so weird.
The locals who live around there now also tell stories that the SS members would often have large parties at the hotel on April 20th, Hitler's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I will just go ahead and let this out. On one occasion, I believe there was actually a very famous Nazi party member. I didn't note his name down here, who was eventually actually caught, I think, by either the FBI or the Mossad down there. And it's here told that they stopped having these parties after he was caught down there. So we're not quite sure if we're referencing Hitler exactly. And also, we have this whole issue of like the idea of a shrine. So like them celebrating his birthday wouldn't be that weird, even if he was dead. Although it is weird for a dude to start goose stopping through the lobby to tell you.
Yeah, to tell you who's staying at the hotel. Yeah, that's a little weird. That's a little weird.
Even weirder, it seems like this. It seems like the culture, I guess, if you could call Nazism a culture, has survived down there. So one of these shark hunter guys, he went out to eat at a local restaurant there's been stuff that's built up around this. This was built in like the 30s. So, I mean,
Yeah.
but it's still very isolated. He went to a local restaurant and he noticed that him and the waiter were having trouble with Spanish. There's all kinds of these weird stories. And so he just started speaking to the waiter in German, who just started fluently speaking back to him.
Nothing weird about that.
No. So the shark hunter asked the waiter how he knew German, and he said, "I am Swiss." And this is where it starts to get kind of weird.
Now it's going to get weird. Okay.
Now it's going to get weird. The author asked the waiter if he knew the song "Mattress and Lead."
We all know that one. That's a banger.
Yeah, and this hardcore U-boat guy knows it because he loves Nazi stuff. So this is actually a song that was specifically sung by U-boaters when they were on their patrols or getting ready to leave on a mission.
Are you going to sing it for me?
I wish. I tried to find it. I couldn't. There's this. I think there's like multiple songs named this, but I think like this guy knew what was being asked based on the other questions.
Mm-hmm.
So at first the waiter said, "No, I don't know that song." But later, while the shark boys, I'll call them shark boys, the shark hunters, were having dinner, the waiter actually came by and started singing it from start to finish. I guess he was starting to feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
So in his diary, the shark hunter guy says that after the waiter finished singing the whole song, he smiled at the waiter, and when the waiter saw his approval, the waiter went on to sing the entire Panzerlied, a song that was sung by the Nazi armored divisions in World War II.
Mm.
So this dude's just like hanging out, being a waiter in the middle of nowhere, Argentina, and happens to know all these old songs that were sung by very specific German branches of the military.
Yeah.
After the song, you're gonna laugh at this one. The shark hunter applauded and gave the waiter a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
To which the waiter smiled, stood up straight, clicked his heels, and gave him a Nazi salute.
Like you do.
Yeah, and that's the end of that story.
Well, I think that guy might have been a Nazi. I think that waiter might have been a previous Nazi before. He seems to know, or just a really big fan of Nazis.
This is 2008, though, so you had to have been like the son of a Nazi.
Oh, this is 2008?
Yes.
I missed that part.
Yeah, the shark hunters went down there in 2008.
Okay. Well, okay, so this is like somebody's grandson.
Grandson or son, I mean, depending on how old he is.
Yeah, I don't know
It
how
didn't
old he
say.
is. That's ooh. Yeah, that actually makes it weirder that it's like somebody later on in time.
Yeah, it's like he learned all this from his family and they sung it enough at this hotel or whatever that
Yes.
he remembered the whole thing.
Yeah, it does kind of seem that way.
I'm starting to wonder if, like, from a certain latitude south all the way down to Antarctica, there just is a Nazi country, but it's just like different people in different places who communicate like secretly.
Maybe.
One of these hotels actually, for a period of time, ran like the only radio station out of the country, like from this German hotel.
Hmm.
There's lots of weird stuff like that.
So there's definitely enough of them there that they needed a dedicated radio station to play the hits.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what was coming out of the radio station or if it was encrypted or what, but it was mentioned as a point of interest.
Hmm.
Here's another very strange thing about the Hotel Yao Yao. The picture that hangs in its front entrance, and I included the picture here. And as you can see, this is President Eisenhower at the
Yeah.
hotel in the middle of nowhere in, they believe, 1960 for no apparent reason.
What?
Yeah, this is around the turn of the administrations. President Eisenhower went and hung out at this hotel
Oh man.
for, as far as we can tell, no apparent reason. And he's just meeting here with people from the
Do we know who
staff.
this guy is in the picture with him? Obviously, looks like maybe a general behind. No, it just looks like they're both wearing suits. Do we know who those guys are?
I don't believe so.
I don't want to point fingers. The dude in the forefront of the picture on the right here,
That kind of looks like a Nazi.
he kind of. I mean, I'm sorry if you're not a Nazi, but you're at a Nazi hotel, kind of looking like a Nazi a little bit. I don't know if it's the smug face. I don't know what it is that leans me that direction, but it really does. But I'm more just, I think, hiding the fact of how hurt I am that Eisenhower is walking around this place in this picture. And they have it hanging in the lobby. So they are proud that this happened.
Yes, they are.
Somebody that runs this hotel is like, this is a magic moment. Let me get it. Also, this is the entryway now.
Now, that makes sense that if a president shows up wherever you work, you would take a picture and hang it. Haven't you ever been in like a sports bar and they got pictures of like a Hard Rock Cafe? I mean,
fair, all right, but the only way you can make this feel better for me is if you tell me that there is also a picture of the Beatles at this hotel right next to it, as well as Elvis on the other side. Like there better be like a collage of celebrities at this hotel.
No, it's just Eisenhower in 1960.
Yeah, still making my spidey sense tingle a little bit then.
Yeah, something's not right. And this would have been approximately 2 years before it's rumored. Hitler, by the way, in lore, 2 years before it's rumored, Hitler was the president of the United States. He 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 was the president of the United States. if we're not going quite all Antarctica, but we're not going official story, died around 62, 63
Okay.
in one of these hotels. So this was many. Yeah, I don't know what Eisenhower was doing there, and I tried to. And you know what? I'll do more research as we go on because I won't. I'm not saying I'm doing a sequel, but I want to get more into what happened to Hitler at some point, and I want to.
Yeah.
And part of that's going to be figuring out what the deal is with this photo, because when you search for Eisenhower and you search for things involving this area, Argentina, it all leads back to like other things. It has nothing to do with this particular visit. I couldn't figure out why he was there. And the authors of this book couldn't figure out why he was there.
That's even weirder.
So this is one of the many hotels with German money in this area of the world. Another one is the Hotel Eden in La Falda, Argentina. And by the end of the war, this hotel was owned by a Hitler sympathizer and possible financier, Walter Eichhorn, and is rumored to be the possible death place of Hitler by natural causes after the war, again around 62, 63. Now, let's get into some CIA documents. According to a 1975, or according to a October 17th, 1955, cable from the CIA base in Macabro, Venezuela, and including among the newly released documents related to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 2017, a former German trooper and newspaper editor named Philip Creton told a CIA agent in Macabo that he had met Hitler in the Colombian city of Tunya in 1954.
Really?
Sitian, who was the co-owner of the former Macrabo Times, told a former member of the CIA base that while he was working for a railroad company in Colombia, he had met an individual who strongly resembled and claimed to be Adolf Hitler, the document says. And I have here a picture from the document. I guess he decided to do a photo op on the train.
That looks like Hitler.
Yeah, it looks like a bit of an aged Hitler. This would have been, let's think, 9 years after the war, 7 years before his death.
So he's
not the greatest photo, but that looks like a dude sitting with Hitler.
Yeah.
Now, a previous CIA memo from the agency's base in Caracas, Venezuela, dated October 3rd, 1955, said that Citron had said that Hitler lived in Colombia under the name Adolf Schrittelmeyer. I like that he kept his first name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the mustache based on that picture.
Hello, my name is Adolf. Schrittelmeyer.
Schrittelmeyer. They'll never know.
And here's how confident Hitler was, and that the alleged Nazi leader was confident he would not be arrested for war crimes because they had occurred more than 10 years ago.
Well, everybody knows about the statute of limitations on war crimes. You just got to skirt the law long enough, and you can do genocides as often as you want, once a decade, actually.
Exactly.
I love that that was the argument. I'm pretty sure I know how American courts work, and they're not going to be able to do anything about this diplomatic immunity.
And international courts, I think they still put people on trial.
Oh, they do.
I think there was someone like a few years ago who worked for a concentration camp.
It's definitely happened in our lifetime for sure. Like I remember definitely hearing about this. Yeah, when they find him, they still get prosecuted.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations for like Grand Theft Auto is probably shorter than that for being Hitler.
I mean, yeah.
But he was an optimist.
Definitely. That's usually how you hear him described.
So these memos included a picture of this man resembling the Fuhrer, and it was supposedly taken in January 1955. And I'll set this up here. Now, this was allegedly debunked, but I can't tell how it's been debunked. Now, this led me to...
The photo's been debunked or supposedly been debunked?
No, apparently the story's been debunked. And it's weird because when you read about how it's been debunked, it's like, oh, he wasn't in Colombia. He was in Venezuela.
Oh, well, that's better?
I mean, there's no like strong you can't debunk or prove this guy's story. He says, I met Hitler. Here's a picture of me with somebody who looks like Hitler. I mean, like, there's no way of.
You know what? Okay, so I'll play devil's advocate here. Based on where they are and that there seem to be a lot of Nazis there, is it that much of a stretch that they may have like somebody dress up as Hitler? Or somebody's just that obsessed with Hitler that they then kind of try and take on that identity? But then again, that seems like that would be disrespectful, and that probably wouldn't be okay within that community.
Like Hitler cosplay?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm going with it. But then I'm like, I don't know. Would they be into that? I don't know. We're gonna have to interview a Nazi to really find out about this, Dennis, I think.
Yeah, but like an old Nazi.
An old, very old Nazi. Yeah, somebody obviously from there. It's gonna be a hard find.
I don't want any of these neo-Nazi types.
No, they're not gonna know anything that we need to know.
Now, I went in search of these documents.
Okay.
And I'll tell you right now, the reading room is usually really good. The CIA, FBI, U.S. intelligence reading room or whatever. This one kept leading me to some strange article about something completely different. And I would click on these links.
Well, you're on a new list now, so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm on every list, man.
Me too. Guilty by association.
Now, I did find a document called Hitler Escape Routes to Argentina. That was in the FBI reading room. Again, for whatever reason, I couldn't get this thing to open. It would often lead me to dead links. I'm going to attempt to find it for any future thing about Hitler, just to do clean house. But I had a hard time finding stuff about this in the reading rooms.
Okay.
Except I found like a 55-page document that was all of J. Edgar Hoover's files on Hitler escaping to Argentina.
That seems like a lot of files for a dude that didn't escape and killed himself in a bunker.
Now I will say this. I attached a link of it to the show notes. Many of them are like newspaper articles about the allegations, but many of them are also firsthand tips. And I want to go through one of the firsthand tips that I found to be better than the rest. Some of these, for instance, I'm looking at one right now, and I couldn't include all these because it's a bunch of pictures. One of them says it's a handwritten note to J. Edgar Hoover, and it's just from, and this is heavily redacted. It just says, "Dear sir, I'll bet you dollars to a donut that Hitler is located right in New York City. There's no other city in the world where it could be as easily as absorbed, nor could you have considered this possibility." And it includes like J. Edgar Hoover's follow-up letter, because for each one of these, he has to send a follow-up letter, and it says, "Thank you for this information. Your letter has been acknowledged, and you can be advised that we'll look into this." This is basically what he says.
Cool.
And there's a lot of stuff like this. But there's one that I found, and actually, oh man, did I say 45? Yeah, it's actually 203 pages. I think I got there about 100 some though.
Jeez.
It's a lot of people saying they know Hitler, but keep in mind, like a good third of it is J. Edgar Hoover answering back and saying thank you.
You think Hoover just sat there and you think he hand wrote all these letters back out? He had somebody doing that. He had to have.
They're all typewritten.
Okay.
He barely signed half of them.
I like to think that Hoover was in the White House. It was a simpler time. And he was just reading all these letters back when, they didn't get bombarded with fan mail and stuff. Like,
we're going to have to do an episode on J. Edgar Hoover.
He is an interesting guy.
He was involved in just about every,
Oh, yeah.
So keep in mind, this is heavily redacted. But there's one that actually comes from the Los Angeles field office in September of 1945 that I found to be interesting. It was important enough for them to actually put on official FBI a letterhead for him instead of just having like the person's letter. And this is somebody who came in person. It says that, do you prefer the term classified or redacted? Because you're going to hear it a lot.
Classified, I guess.
Okay. It says classified reports contact with classified who aided six top Argentinian officials. So automatically we have someone in the know. He's not betting dollars to donuts that Hitler's in New York City.
Yeah.
He aided them in hiding Adolf Hitler upon his landing by submarine in Argentina. Hitler is reported to be hiding out in the foothills off the southern Andes. Information obtained from Classified, which we're unable to verify because of Classified's disappearance, attempts to look into this, his police and INS files. This is from the Los Angeles field office. In Hollywood, California, Classified reported to a classified on the city desk of the Los Angeles newspaper that upon his leaving the um, Melody Lane restaurant in Hollywood, and excuse me, I lost my place. On Vine, on or about July 28th, 1945, he met a friend of his who at the time was engaged in a conversation with an individual who later identified himself as Classified, a friend of whose identity he does not wish to disclose because of reasons that will later be explained. He remarked to Classified that he would like to have him meet Classified, as it was quite evident that there was a problem on his mind. Classified continued that being introduced to Classified, his friend, he spent several hours with Classified and obtained the following information. Now, at this point, and I looked into this letter a little bit on the outside, it seems like one of these people is an agent, and another person is an Argentinian national who doesn't
Okay.
want to be deported back.
Yeah.
But we only know this from context clues as we go on.
Okay.
So one of these men disclosed to the other that he wished to find some high government official who could guarantee him immunity from being sent back to Argentina if he told him the following information. According to him, he was one of 4 men who met Hitler and his party when they landed from 2 submarines in Argentina approximately 2.5 weeks after the fall of Berlin. This man continued that the first sub came close to shore about 11 o'clock p.m. after it had been signaled that it was safe to land, and a doctor and several men disembarked. Approximately 2 hours later, the second sub came ashore, and Hitler, 2 women, and another doctor, and several more men, making the whole party arriving by submarine, approximately 50 were aboard. By prearranged plan with 6 top Argentine officials, pack horses were waiting for the group, and by daylight, all supplies were loaded on the horses, and an all-day trip inland toward the foothills of the southern Andes was started. At dusk, the party arrived at the ranch where Hitler and his party, according to our source, are now hiding. Most specifically, our source explained that the subs landed along the tip of Valdez Peninsula along the southern tip of Argentina in the Gulf of San Catias. He told the source that there are several tiny villages in the area where members of Hitler's party would eventually stay with German families. He named the towns as San Antonio, Vidima, Neuquén, Muster, Carmena, and Racine. The source maintains that he could name the 6 Argentine officials and also the names of the 3 other men who helped Hitler inland to his hiding place. Classified explained that he was given $15,000 for helping in the deal and explained to the informant that he was hiding out in the United States now so that he could later tell how he got out of Argentina. He stated to the FBI source that he would tell his story to the United States officials after Hitler's capture so that they might keep him from having to return to Argentina. He further explained to us that the matter was weighing on his mind and that he did not wish to be mixed up in the business any further. According to the source, Hitler is suffering from asthma and ulcers, has shaved off his mustache, and has a long butt on his upper lip. He gave the following directions. If you will go to a hotel in San Antonio, Argentina, I will arrange for a man to meet you there and locate the ranch where Hitler is. It's heavily guarded, of course, and you'll be risking your life to go there. If you go to Argentina, place an ad in the Examiner stating the quote, call Hampstead 8458, and I know that you are on your way to San Antonio. The writer contacted him in an attempt to locate Classified in order that he might be vigorously interviewed in detail concerning the above story and reiterated the information set out as above. adding that the friend to whom he was talking in front of the Melody Lane restaurant was a friend of his and by the name of Jack, last name unknown, but that the introduction had further conversation with Jack and that Jack advised him that while he was eating his lunch at this restaurant, Classified sat at the table and after the meal followed him out where he engaged in a conversation in front of the restaurant. According to Jack, he had mentioned that he had important information to divulge and solicited his cooperation in locating the proper officials to whom to impart this information. Jack said that it was at this time that he came along and asked that the story be told in a hurry to the officials. Classified added that he had spent several hours engaged in conversation, which he explained was a feeler on the part of the Bureau and to determine if he was all right and could be relied on. He then advanced the story, which is being related now. Classified advised that he told Classified he would try to help him and for him to call back to the Hampstead barber in a few days and he would have more information for him. The source continued that he immediately contacted him at the Examiner and tried to arrange a meeting with Classified, and that in the meantime inserted the story in the newspaper, which according to him evidently soared. This is weird. Classified, and stated that he was unable to throw any more light on the story, and as much as all the information obtained is incorporated in the story, and accordingly did not spell his name but simply introduced himself in a phonetic manner. He was advised by the writer by telephone that if he was observed at any time to immediately engage him in conversation and to explain that the proper authorities wished to discuss this matter further in detail with him personally. He also advised that he eats 2 meals daily at the same restaurant, but he has not observed the subject since his first meeting. The writer has continually spot checked the Melody Lane restaurant at mealtime in an effort to locate him. The Hollywood and Los Angeles police records have been seized and checked. The records of Immigration and Naturalization Services were also checked, but with negative results. Because of the lack of sufficient information to support the story, it's believed impossible to continue these efforts to locate Hitler with sparse information obtained to date. However, I will say this: the FBI, according to our author, not of this report, but according to the author of Hitler in Argentina, the FBI did in fact believe after this memo until the 70s that Hitler was in Argentina.
But they never went and found him?
They could never find him. That we know of.
Huh.
Because he's in Antarctica, man.
I mean, when I dug around with Antarctica and all the inner Earth stuff and kind of where I went with that episode, yeah, it seems more likely that South America, or Argentina in particular, was a jump off point, possibly. Or they were using it for supplies in Antarctica, or communication. Like there was some linkage there, but there was definitely travel going back and forth for the Nazis, like between Argentina and Antarctica, definitively. Like we know that. So if you got bases set up in the most remote place in the world, where's going to be easiest to defend?
I don't know.
I don't think it's the jungles of South Africa or South America when you have, again, bases set up in the ground in Antarctica.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Maybe it is the jumping off point.
And especially you got to keep in the time, like at the time, it's not 2021 with our technology when they're doing all this. Like it's a lot harder to go to Antarctica and just go wander around and explore and send troops there. Like after World War II, we were sending troops there to train for if we had to go fight in Siberia. Like we weren't prepared to be in Antarctica.
That's true.
So if you were going to try and run away, and then if you want to take the even further leap of there is an inner Earth, and the Nazis did find that, that's definitely where he went.
I love that we're so far gone. I tried to keep this straight to Argentina, and we're already back to Antarctica, but I got
Well, you should have known that's where my heart was going to take us, because that's where all my research went with it. And it, again, I didn't get sidetracked with the Hitler stuff, but yeah, no, it seems like there's plenty of stuff. As much as there's pointing this way, there seems to be almost as much pointing him towards Antarctica.
Now, there's a letter that I left out that I'll go into briefly. That's another. All this classified stuff to J. Edgar Hoover they redact the names out of who said it, which is very disappointing.
Yes.
But you can kind of tell from his responses who's taken more seriously than others.
Yeah.
Like some people get form letters, some people get nothing, some people get a more substantive response like "Thank you, I will look into this."
Mm-hmm.
There's one that claims he's underground in Argentina.
Okay, that's kind of a meet halfway for us, isn't it?
Yeah, this one's addressed to J. Edgar as "Dear Friend," and was responded to. It says, "I have some news in my possession that I believe to be true and would interest you very much. I cannot divulge the means that I've gotten these, but it basically goes on to say Hitler's in Argentina. He's living in a grand underground establishment beneath the hacienda, 675 miles west from Florian Palace. He has exact coordinates. I won't go into them here. And that there is no western entrance or elevated into the mountain, to which Hitler's new underground is a vault operated by photoelectric cells, and that by code, signals, or even a dim flashlights, wall slides to the left, etc., insistently slides back into place. He basically is describing like this giant evil underground, and this is in November of 1945.
Well, and to throw back to another, you remember Marconi?
Yeah.
And he was down there in South America, like around the Andes, I believe, in a place that we've never really found. Or he was in a volcano, but supposedly he took a bunch of scientists down there and set up shop and free energy and stuff. Like about around the same times, I believe he was doing it in the 40s. 30s,
Yeah,
40s.
this is November 45. It says the walls of the mountain will open up, an auto will go in, it will automatically close. He says, "Do not believe the British lie that Hitler is dead. I'm a full-blooded American. I think this should be investigated at once. Your friend." And we don't know who. I wish I knew who.
I'm really just spinning with the Marconi stuff now. Like I hadn't even pieced those two things together. I don't think we even talked about any of that. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I encourage everybody to go and look at this giant file, though, because pretty much everybody thought everything about Hitler. Like, New York is not the craziest. New York is almost maybe the craziest because it's written on like a napkin. The rest of these are either like
this is some guy drunk at a bar that like
I think
Hitler could totally be in this bar right now, man. You know what? I'm gonna write Eisenhower a letter right now because he not in my New York, not in my New York.
Again, you can tell how serious it is because, for instance, the one that, like this one I just read, is more of a formal letter that's entered. Others are handwritten. Some are replied to, some are not. That one that's saying they had a source that's like heavily redacted really interested me when I found it, though, because it redacted so much, and it seemed to get very particular into this is the date he got there. This is, I know that can be a little bit boring to go through all the way through, but I don't know. I just found it. I found that one very interesting, and I would love to know what efforts were gone to try to find him. If any. Yeah. So that's it, man. That's my research for it.
This was fun. I'm glad we got a couple episodes. We each did a fun one for the other one.
Yeah, we did. Okay, I'm glad. Thank you.
We kind of did some fun.
I'm trying to bum you out. Somebody right now is like, "Why is Hitler escaping fun?" Because it is fun.
Listen to some other episodes that have more current events in them, and I mean, not that this is a lighthearted episode, but just the content. Like it's not as dire as some of the other ones, or is just depressing.
This one was hard for me because I intentionally wasn't trying to get into Antarctica because I know we're going to do more about that. Yeah. And so I wanted to mash like the official history with like some eyewitness reports that say that's not quite what it is, you know what I mean, without getting into like a lot of speculation. So I apologize if this was somewhat boring. I found it fascinating to research.
I feel like I'm gonna do a now I've got a counter with Hitler and Antarctica argument now. Like now I have to fully put that research together and state my case for why Hitler went to Antarctica.
I would love that. You should do that.
Oh, it's gonna happen.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for listening, Pat. Unless you got any final thoughts, I'm just gonna say I now don't believe. After having read, I didn't know till I researched this that Stalin outright stated he wasn't dead a couple times.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that at all.
That to me, it doesn't matter where you think he went. That's a weird thing to do. And I know he had some political reasons for doing that. You can speculate. And that was almost more my speculation than anything,
Yeah.
because I was like, well, why would he say that? I'm like, what's up with Spain in 1945? What's up with Argentina in
I'm
1945?
still gonna be writing some like not heated, but I mean confrontational emails to a few history teachers that I had in middle school. Though I'm gonna be honest,
About not telling you that Hitler wasn't dead.
the Stalin thing and just the size of the bunker.
Oh, yes, that's a big one too. Also, I would love to know where his teeth are supposedly at this point.
Yes, that would.
Because
Yeah,
you would think that would be possible DNA evidence to see based on family members now in
yep.
this late in the game. I
Because he
don't
definitely
know.
had family running around the rest of the world. He had like a cousin that was here doing all
Yeah,
kinds of stuff. Like, yeah, no, there's people. There were other Hitlers running around.
I want to know where you're at, Hitler.
So
Anyway,
there's definitely family members that they could have tested this against, and even now, like with their remains or whatever, if necessary. I know
I
that's
think
a
a lot of
little
this stuff. I think a
mean
lot
to
of
his
stuff was
cousin or whatever, but
lost. Sorry, we got to take your blood. I think
which
a lot of this stuff was lost though, in the Soviet vaults.
that's
Uh,
probably. I would assume that's probably what's happened here.
yeah. Well, anyway, this won't be the last time we talk about Hitler escaping, but thank you for listening. Thank you, Patrick, for participating. My guy who listens. I've been your I've been your host, Dennis Cheney, for the week.
Wow.
And next week, Pat will be the host, and I'll be
No, I will be the skeptic researcher of the week. This is
and
what
I'll
I'm
be
going to be.
and I'll be a nobody.
This is going to be, yeah, you're, no, I'm not even going to introduce you next week. I'm just going to start talking.
Oh, I was hoping if you're the skeptic researcher, I could be the host.
You're just really tied to that title.
All right, thank you, everyone. We actually do like each other, believe it or not, and
I don't like him.
well, we all love we're united in loving you, and so we're gonna stay together and not get divorced until you all leave us. But this has been our May. This is the first episode of June. You made May amazing. Let's make June
Yes.
even more amazing. Tell a friend, and thank you, everybody. Have a great June, and we'll see you next week.
Yes. Like, rate, subscribe. Bye.